Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our class for MAC. Right. We are going to have our class. I wanted to have another extra class during the weekend just for an hour or two on Sunday, but I will tell you, I will confirm by Friday. But the other week, I think the other week, I will now resume the longer sessions during the weekend until you're right. I don't know. I can't remember the date, but the other week we'll be doing longer sessions so that we can cover up. But this Sunday I might call for a class, but a shorter one, not a very long one. Maybe just 1.5 hours, 1 hour to 1.5 hours. That can only happen on Sunday. My Saturdays are hectic. It's unfortunate. So I will inform you in the group by Friday. Because today we want to finish off on process costing, but I still have other topics that I need to cover. So I was thinking that if we can utilize those extra classes. So I will tell you by Friday, just check your groups by Friday. I might need an extra class on Sunday, but that extra class will not be long. It will just be 1 hour to 1.5 hours. But the other week, we'll definitely have a long class from the other week, a minimum of 2.5 hours to 4 hours. So I'll be telling you as we progress, so that we make sure that by the time that we write, we have managed to cover everything that will be writing. So our normal class will continue on Wednesdays, but in addition to the normal class, we'll have extra classes. Then after writing, I will maybe, I think after you're writing your test, I might give you, there will be a time that in June, I might give you a 2-week break. Right. So please, for now, let's push for now, so that we make sure that we are ready. So I don't know, I just want to make sure that we are up and ready for the test. Right. So please check your groups by Friday, sorry. I will inform you by Friday if we're going to meet on Sunday. But the Sunday one, it will not be a very long one like the one that we did weekend. It will just be 1.5 hours, and it's for your MAC 3761 strictly. Right. So today we're going to proceed and do a process costing. Now, if you still remember, last week we started on process costing, and we did process costing using the weighted average method. We're using question 1. So today I want to move on to question 2. I think we're using the weighted average method. I think we used the weighted average method. So now I want to go to question 2. And on question 2, I would like to now turn to the first in, first out method. Right, so I will use the first in, first out method. You'd find that the question states that it's weighted average, but please, can you note that I'm going to use the first in, first out, so that we can also have a feel of the first in, first out. So please note that I'm changing what is on the question. Although the question says weighted average, I'm not going to do weighted average, because we did that in our previous class. I want to change so that you also know what happens there. Right. Right. So let's look at this one. Yogurt Limited manufactures a single product by means of a single manufacturing process and uses a process costing system. The following information is available for April 2015. Right. We are given the work in progress at the beginning of the month, which was 25% complete in terms of conversion and 100% complete in terms of materials. Then we have got the units placed into production. They added 150,000. Right. Then the units transferred during April, That is, the finished goods were 147,500. Right. Then they said material is added at the beginning of the process. Conversion costs are incurred evenly throughout the process. I think I explained what this means. It simply means that if a product is 20% complete, 20% of the conversion work and 20% of the conversion cost will have been incurred. If it's 30% complete, 30% of the conversion work and 30% of the conversion cost will have been incurred. Right. Normal losses are estimated at 15% of the input that reaches the wasted point. Remember, we said that most processes, there is a loss of input that is expected, even if the system is operating optimally. So that's what we call the what? The normal loss. So according to this question, they are expecting that their normal losses will be 15% of all the goods that reach that wastage point. Right. Then we're told that losses occur at the end of the process. This is the wastage point. So that means the last final process, maybe it's packaging, that happens at the end. That's where the losses happen. So that means the losses, the wastage point is at 100% point. End of the process is 100%. Right. Then yogurt values inventory. Okay, I said that please note that we are not going to use the weighted average method so that we can be able to have a feel of the other method. Right. So now let's do the let's do the answering. The quantity statement, they want us to do the quantity statement, production cost statement, and the cost allocation statement. Right. So question 2. Quantity statement. April 2015. Remember, in our quantity statement, the columns that we need. Right. When we're doing our quantity statement, we first look at our inputs. Our inputs will be made up of the inputs that were already in the system at the beginning of the period, which we call opening WIP. These are the items that were already in the system at the beginning of the period. Right. Now, at the beginning of the period, we had 50,000 units. Those were the items that were in the system. Right. So we already had inputs for 50,000 units. Right. Then, okay, let me just format so that we can be able to see clearly. Right. Right, we have 50,000. Those are the items that were in stock at the beginning of the period. Then during the period, we then add more units into the process. We then add more units into the process, right? We are told that units, 150,000 units were placed into production in April. So we've put into production 150,000. So these are the inputs into our production process. Right. Then now, if we're using if you saw, we just went straight when we're using the weighted average to completed and transferred. So it didn't matter from which batch did these goods come from, simply because our costs are weighted. Simply because our costs are weighted, we don't care whether they're coming from last year or this year. The cost for last year and this year, they'll be weighted together here to find the common cost per unit, which we found here. But now, if we're using first in, first out, the costs for last year that are in opening inventory are costed separately from the ones that are for the current period. Because we say the first units to come in will be the first to go out. So under the completed and transferred, first of all, because we're saying first in, first out, we'll have the goods that were completed from opening WIP. First of all, we'll have the goods that were transmitted, completed from opening WIP. Our opening WIP was 50,000. But you have to check, are they going to come out as 50,000? Remember, we've got a normal loss of 15%. But you have to check if the opening WIP had already passed the wastage point, then they will come out as 50,000 at the end of the period. But if they had not yet passed the wastage point by the time that they came into this period, then you have to take into account the normal loss. Right. So we're saying here, these 50,000 units, when they came into this period, they were 25% complete. But our wastage point is at the end of the process, at the 100% stage. So that means when this opening inventory came into the current period, it had not yet reached the wastage point. It only reached the wastage point during the current period. So because of that, we have to take into account the normal loss to find the output that will come from the 50,000 units. Right. So that means these 50,000, when they come out, they will no longer be 50,000, but they will be 50,000 times 85%. 85% is coming from 100 minus our normal loss, which we have that our normal loss is what? 15% is the normal loss. Right. So what do we get?
Mr. Eugene?
Yes.
I did not quite get the loss at, because I think they said we incur the loss at year end, but I see that we are already
not at year end, at the end of the process.
Yes, at the end of the process. So why are we, like, I'm trying to understand why we are accounting for it now here rather than at the end of the process.
No, we are saying the opening WIP. Is that we say the open, when we say open the end of the process, we're not saying the end of the calculation, the end of the production process. So we're saying our opening inventory, it reached that end during the current month of April. Is that right?
Yes.
That's why we're taking that loss into account, because the opening inventory reached that stage where the losses happened during April. When it came, it was still 25%. Then it reached that point, that conclusion point. Remember, we're using first in, first out. That means before they concluded this 150, they first finished this 50.
Oh, yeah.
So those 50, they reached that end process. They were concluded the production process during the current period. So when they reached that end point, there was a loss of 15% of the inputs.
Okay, understood.
So at the end of the day, we only had 42,500 units. Is that right? Right. So that means by the time that they finish producing these units, they had lost the other 15% and they only came out as 42,500. Then in terms of our costs, remember that when they came into these current periods, right? When they came into this current period, if we can check on our question paper, they were, in terms of material, they were 100% complete. So in this period, that means there were no materials added to this to these units because the raw materials had already been added during the previous period, right? So that means our percentage raw materials that was added here, it's 0. So that means they added nothing in terms of raw materials. Remember, we're trying to find the cost for this period, for this period, right? When we were doing weighted average, we averaged the cost. That's why we included them. But now, when we are using this first in, first out, the opening inventory is valued separately. The opening inventory is valued separately from the current production. So during the current production phase, we didn't add any raw materials. Then in terms of conversion, when they came, they were 25% complete. So that means during the current period, we did the rest of the job, which was the 75%. Right. So if you say 75% of 42,500, what do we get? Okay, thank you. That means the conversion work that we did during we did conversion work on an equivalent of 31,875. Right. Then we'll have our completed and transferred. Normal loss. Closing WIP. So my friends, this part of completed from will only be there if we are using the first in, first out. Let me mention that here we use the first in, first out. Right, let me write it here so that our friends who are not here note that we used first in, first out. And not weighted average. It's on question. Right, I'm doing it so that we have got our friends, they'll be confused now. Right, the reason why I've done a first in, first out is because during the last time we used weighted average. So this part, if you saw, it was not there, the completed from. It will only be there when we use them first in, first out. Why? Because the order in which we produce our goods is important. Right. Then we know that, okay, let me just put these totals here. Remember that our total inputs will be equal to our total outputs if we take into account the losses. Right, the completed and transferred. We know that the units that were completed and transferred, units completed and transferred were 147,500. So we'll have 147,500. I'm going to work backwards. Right, my friends, if we completed 147,500 and 42,500 came from opening WIP, that means current production contributed the remainder. Which is 147,500 minus 42,500. What do we get? Right, 105,000. That means we produced during the current period, we finished producing 147,500. Of these, 42,500 came from the opening inventory. It's first in, first out. Then 105 came from current production. In our current production, it will be 100% in terms of raw materials, which is 105,000, because all the raw materials were added during the current period, and all the conversion work was also done during the current period. Our current production will be 100% on both areas. Why? Because they were started during the current period and all the raw materials were added and all the conversion work was done during the current period. So that's why you would find that it will be 100% for both. Right, then now we calculate our normal loss. Okay, let us record our closing inventory. Right, the closing inventory, we are told that it's the 30 April work in process. That's our closing inventory. We have 15,000 units. And these 15,000 units are 100% complete in terms of materials and 60% in terms of conversion. So we'll have our closing WIP, which is 15,000 units. They are 100% in terms of materials, which make them 15,000. And they are 60% in terms of conversion, which will make them 60% of 15,000. We're going to get 9,000. Right. Then your normal loss from last week. Let's remember our formula. We said that our normal loss is the total inputs, in this case, which is 200,000, minus our opening WIP if the percentage completion is above the wastage point. So we subtract the opening WIP if its percentage completion was above the wastage point. In this case, our opening WIP is 25% complete. Whilst the wastage point, that is the point where losses happen, is the 100% point. So our opening WIP is below the wastage point, so we don't need to subtract it because it was still at 25 at the beginning of the period. Right. Then the closing WIP is subtracted if it's below wastage point. Our closing WIP, according to this question, it's still below wastage point because it's 60% complete. So that means when we calculate our our normal loss, we subtract the closing inventory. So remember, we subtract the opening inventory if its percentage completion is above the wastage point. Why? Because it will mean that the opening WIP already suffered the loss in the last period. So in this period, there will no longer be any loss on these goods. That is if they're above the wastage point percentage. Now our wastage point, remember, losses okay at the end, which is the 800% point. So these were, they were only 25%. That means they were below. So that means they crossed that wastage point during the current period. So we're not going to take them out. But the closing inventory is still at 60%. That means by the end of the month, these goods have not yet reached that point where losses happen. So we can't calculate a loss if they've not yet reached that stage. That means they are still 15,000. the loss will only happen at the 100% stage. So that means in this particular case, we know that our normal loss is 15%. So we'll calculate our normal loss as 15% multiplied by 200,000 minus the 15,000. What do we get? Thank you. 15,000. So that will be 15,000. So it's 15,000. This will be our normal loss. These are units. Are you sure that it's 15,000? I don't think so. I think this figure is wrong. Unless if I'm making a mistake there. Can it be 15,000?
According to the figures you gave, it gives 15,000. My question is, I was subtracting the opening or the closing?
The closing. Because it is
The
not
raw
yet reached the
material
wastage
or
point.
the conversion one?
No, we're talking about units here. When we calculate our normal loss, we're talking about the total units.
Okay.
We are
let
not
me
yet on
see.
the raw material conversion.
Okay.
We're talking about the total units. So from that calculation, I think it's wrong. It can't be 15,000. I think 27,750, that can be fine. So this is 27,750. Right. Sorry. Right. Sorry. And then here before we come to the normal loss, we're supposed to add here. That means it's this 0 plus this. Then this one will be equal to this plus this one. Right. We don't have to put percentages here because there's a 0 and there's a 100 here. So we just leave it like that. And this one is 75 and this one is 100. Right. Now our normal loss in terms of raw materials, it's always 100. So that's 27,750. In terms of conversion, it takes the wastage point. Now, according to the question, our wastage point losses okay at the end of the process, which is at the 100% stage. So this will be 100. Always remember that the normal loss and the abnormal loss in terms of conversion, they take the wastage point because our assumption is that they will only be there up to the wastage point. So in this case, the wastage point is happening at the end of the process. So they will only be identified at the very end at the 100% point. They will reach the 100% point. So that is 27,750. Right. Then our abnormal loss will be the anything which is missing. So we would say 200,000 minus 147,500 minus 27,750 minus 15,000. So it's this total minus what we already have here. Anything missing, that means it's an abnormal loss. What do we get? I don't understand this question. You are saying what current production on raw material is 100%. Why is it that you wrote? Oh, there's a zero that was that I missed here. Sorry, it was just a typo. Maybe I just instead of 105,000. Sorry, thanks. It was a typing error. There's a zero that I left out. Thank you on that one. Right. So what do we get here? $978. Thank you. So that's 978. And remember that the percentages for normal loss and abnormal loss are the same because we expect that the all losses, whether abnormal or normal, they happen at the same stage. So the percentages will be the same. All right, then you find your total units here. So what do we mean here? We mean during the period, we applied raw materials to 157,530 units. And we applied, we did conversion work on about 180, equivalent of 183,405 units. So this is the difference when we deal with the first in, first out and the weighted average method. Any questions on this quantity statement? Right, so we go to the second part, which is the production cost statement. Production cost statement. Right, we'll have the same columns that we had when we did the production cost column of a production cost statement for a under the weighted, but there will be a difference. Right, we'll start with our opening WIP. Right, our total cost of opening WIP. We know that our opening work in progress, the cost was 88,750 plus 44,000. So we'll have 88,750 plus 44,000. What do we get? What do we get?
$132,750.
132,750. Thank you so much. Right, my friends, we won't include the opening WIP here when we're using the first in, first out. Why? Because the opening in work in progress is valued separately from the current production. Right, then we'll have our current production cost. Right, if you see, when we did the weighted average, we had to include here the raw materials and the conversion here. But when we are using we don't have to include this because here we're doing it because we wanted to find the average cost for both opening and current production. But when we are using FIFO, we value our opening inventory separately. So here it will be only the current production cost, which we have here. Our current production costs were given here. So we have 267, 250, and there is 12900. And our total is right 388,150. Let me find our total cost. These are our costs. Right. Then we'll have our equivalent units, the quantity statements. Right. Our units, we have them from our quantity statement here. In terms of raw materials, we had 157,350. And in terms of conversion, we had 183,405. Then we get our equivalent cost. Per unit would say 267, 250 divided by 157, 530. Then the other one would say 12900 divided by 183,405. What do you get? Give me to 2. It's supposed to be 97. What? Someone is saying abnormal loss is 9750. Did I put this 9780 on my own? I think it says a 50. Can I just correct this? I think the person is right here. It's supposed to be 50 here. Right. So here it will be 157, 500. Then here 183, 375. 500. 375. Right. Thank you so much. Can we just get the cost per unit now? Give me 2 decimal places. Thank you. 1.69. And the other one. Thank you. Is it the same one that I'm saying 1.69 and 1.70? Which one is the correct one? When you round off to 2 decimal places.
1.70 would be correct if it's rounded off.
Okay. Thank you. So what is the other one? Thank you. .66. So that's correct. A rounded off, not 0.67. Okay. Right. So that's the difference between the weighted and first in first out. So in the when you are using the first in first out, the opening WIP, you only include it on the total because there's no need to find the average cost. The current production will be valued separately. Right. Any questions? If we don't have any questions, then we'll move on to the next part. Right. Our next part, it requires us to do the cost allocation statement. Our next part requires us to do the cost allocation statement. Right. A minute. Right. It wants you to prepare the cost allocation statement. Right now, for you to do the cost allocation statement, the first thing that you have to do is to allocate your normal loss. The first thing that you have to do is to allocate your normal loss. That is if you are not using the shortcut method. I'm going to show you today when we use the shortcut method after finishing this question. Right. So now let's calculate our normal loss. Calculation of normal loss. Right, we now know that our cost for materials is around 70 per unit, and conversion is 0.66 per unit. And our normal loss, we know that in terms of raw material, it was 27,750. And in terms of conversion, it was 27,750 again. They are not usually the same, they are just here the same because the wastage point is happening at 100%. So we'd say in terms of raw material, would say 27,750 multiplied by 170. What do you get? Thank you. 47,175. Then we've got our conversion. 27,750 multiplied by 0.66. Thank you. 18,315. That will be the value for our normal loss, of which you get 65.9. Then we'll do the allocation of normal loss. Right. Right. We first have to allocate the raw material cost. Remember that from last week that we allocate to the completed and transferred. Always the abnormal loss. Right. Then the closing WIP, we only allocate the normal loss to the closing WIP if it has passed the wastage point. That is, if its percentage completion is above the wastage point. Only if its percentage completion is above the wastage point. But in this particular case, we know that our closing WIP is at 60% completion. That means by the end of the period, it has not yet reached the wastage point. It has not yet reached the wastage point. Right. So we will not include the closing WIP. Right. In terms of materials, our completed and transferred and abnormal loss, in terms of material, we have 105,000 and 9750. 105,000 and 9750. Right. Our total is equal to, right. Then we allocate this 47,175. To allocate it to the completed and transferred, would say 105,000 divided by 114,750 multiplied by 65,490. What do we get? What do we get? Let's be fast so that we can finish. We get 59925. So we use the proportions. Yes.
Are we allocating with the total 65492 or just the 47,175?
First of all, we're allocating the raw materials. This is raw material.
Yes.
Then we'll do an allocation of conversion.
Yes.
Is that right?
But
In
you
this
use
case,
the total.
hello?
You used the total.
Oh, sorry for that. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So we should use 47. Thank you so much. So can we please correct that figure? Right, thank you. Which is 43167. Then here would say 9750 divided by 114,750 multiplied by 47,175. What do we get? Four zero zero eight. Thank you. Right. You should always get this amount. Then we allocate the conversion. Like in this case, you could allocate them one time, but I avoided that because of them. It's not always that we have a situation whereby we have got the same quantities. In fact, here we can't, because here we've got 136, so it is not possible. Right. Right, thank you. Right, then our conversion. We know that the conversion units on the completed and transferred we have 136,875, and the abnormal loss is 9,750. So we have 136,875 and 9,750. Then we add. So here would say 136,875 divided by 146,625 multiplied by the conversion cost, which is 18,315. What do we get? What do we get? $17,097. Thank you. Then we'll have 9,750 divided by 146,625 multiplied by 18,315. One two one eight. We get right. That's it. So we've done the allocation of the normal loss. After that, then we can prepare our cost allocation statement. there will also be difference between this one and the one that we did under the weighted average. So at your own time, you should note the differences. Right, here we'll start with the opening WIP. Remember that in that other one, we didn't have opening WIP. We have raw materials. And conversion cost. We know that our opening WIP we had this cost here, 88,750 and 44,000. So that's 88,750 and 44,000. So wait, first in, first out does not it values the opening WIP separately from the other products. It doesn't average the cost. Right. Then we have got current production. We have raw materials. Conversion cost. And the allocation of the normal loss. Right. Now, on the raw materials, we're going to say, we know that the current production units in terms of raw materials, they were 105,000. Right. So they were 105,000. So we'd say 105,000 times 1/7, the cost of raw materials per unit. So we'd say 105,000 times 1/7. What do we get? Right. Thank you. 178,500. Then in terms of conversion, we have 136,875. And the cost per unit is 66 cents. So we have 136,875 multiplied by 0.66. What do we get? $93.38. Then our normal loss we add. Thank you. Our normal loss we add these two here. The 43 and the 17. 43, 167 plus the 17, 097. Right, I'll just add here. Right, so this will be the, let me find the total value of the goods that way. Right. Then when we add these two, we then get the cost of the completed and transferred. So that's, so you can see that this a portion is slightly different from the weighted average, which will be made up of the cost that came from the previous period plus this one here. Right. So that will be the cost of the completed and transferred. Because we're saying the opening WIP came with cost of 132. Then there was additional cost of this on the units that were completed. Right. Then we'll have our abnormal loss. For our abnormal loss, we'll have raw materials, conversion cost, and normal loss. Right. Our raw material, remember that we take the quantities here. It's 9750, 9750. Then we multiply by the cost per unit for both. So we'd say 9,750 multiplied by 170. What do we get? Thank you. 1,616,575. And our next one, we'll have 9,750 multiplied by 0.66. $6,435. Thank you. Then our normal loss, we add these two. That is this one here. The 4008 and the 1218. This. Right. Thank you. Then we add up. Right. Then we have our closing WIP. We have raw materials and conversion costs. And remember that we are not allocating the normal loss to the closing WIP because it had not yet reached the wastage point. Right. So our raw materials, in terms of materials, we have got 15,000. And in terms of conversion, we have 9,000. Then we multiply by the cost per unit. So we'd say 15,000 times 170. What do we get? Thank you. 25,500. Then we'll have 9,000 times 0.66. $5,940. Thank you. Then we add. Right. Then we get our total cost allocated. We add our completed and transferred, add our abnormal loss, add our closing WIP. Right. Then we get our rounding difference. for total cost. Actual total cost, we have it in our production cost statement. Here, our 520,900. Then our rounding difference, $620. Right, rounding difference arises because these figures are rounded off. As long as your equivalent cost per unit is rounded off, depending on the extent of the rounding off, there will be a rounding difference. But if you see your rounding difference being 20,000, 50,000, then you see there's a problem. It should just be maybe around a less than 2,000. If it's in the hundreds, around 1,000 is still okay. But if it's too big, that means there's a problem. So that's our allocation statement according to the first in, first out. So I think you can see the difference with this one here. The one for weighted average, we didn't have the opening inventory. Why? Because all the products, including the opening inventory, will have been weighted, they will have been averaged, and the total cost will have been included in the completed and transferred rate. But here now, when we're using the first in, first out, our opening WIP is valued separately. Right. So that's the difference between a weighted average and the first in, first out in terms of our statements that we prepare on process costing. So if we are going to the profit or loss, this cost here, the completed and transferred, is the one that will be transferred to the cost of sales. This one will be treated as an expense. So this one will go to cost of sales as the cost of production. Then they will then add with the opening inventory of finished goods less the closing inventory of finished goods to get our cost of sales. Any questions? Right, then the last part, it says, determine whether the shortcut method can be applied in the preparation of a quantity statement for yogurt limited for the month of April if losses no longer occur at the end, but when the process is 30%. So they are now saying losses do not occur at the end, but they occur when the process is 30%. Right. Right. This is our part B. Maybe you should forgive my numbering here. This one was not part A, B, C. This was all part A, but this was part 1, so that you don't get confused, and those who will be following will not get confused. This one was actually part 2, and this one was actually part 3. Right. My friends, the shortcut method can only be applied if the following 2 conditions exist. Right. Number 1, the opening inventory percentage completion is below wastage point. So in this case, if you can see, our opening WIP is 25%, and they are saying our wastage point, we are now assuming is 30%. So it is indeed below the wastage point. So in this case, we can say our opening WIP is 25% complete, which is below wastage point. Right. Then number 2, the closing inventory percentage completion is above wastage point. That is your closing WIP. In this case, our closing WIP, in this particular case, our closing WIP is 60% complete, which is above the wastage point that were given, which is 30%. So that means the condition is met. Is 60%. Which is above wastage point. Our wastage point is 30%. So as such, since both conditions are met, then the shortcut method can be used. So the shortcut method can be used only if your opening WIP is below the wastage point and the closing WIP is above the wastage point. Then the question is, what is that a shortcut method? The shortcut method will not calculate the normal loss and allocate the normal loss. So it is shortcut because it will avoid all that area that I've highlighted. It will have, you will no longer have to calculate the normal loss and we have no longer have to allocate the normal loss. And this can only be possible if those two conditions are existing, right? Assuming what they just said, let me just redo our, they didn't ask for the quantity statement, but let me just redo it so that you can see what will happen. The top part, I think it will be exactly the same. So I'll just copy it as it is. Right, this part will not change. Then we'll have our normal loss, abnormal loss, closing WIP. So the top part I've just copied it because it doesn't change whether you are using the shortcut or not. Right. Then our total. Right. Then now we won't record anything on the normal loss. Then on a, but the calculation will still be the same. You will still calculate your normal loss and get it this 27,750. So you just say 27,750 in the total, and then you won't record anything under the materials under the conversion. So it will just be 27,750. I think this one will still be 15,000, 9,000. So it was what? 15,000. This one is just like nothing is changing. So that's why I'm not explaining anything here. Right. Let me show you what will change. So all the things that I've shown, they will not change. Right, but your normal loss, you won't record it here on the materials and conversion. Then you record your abnormal loss, you still calculate it in the same way and you get exactly the same answer of 9,750. Right, then here are the differences when we say shortcuts. So this one will be 9,750, the calculation exactly the same. Then this one will be 100% in terms of raw material, which is 9,750. But our conversion is no longer 100. Remember, they said that our wastage point is now 30%, so you should use 30%. Right. Can you find 30% of 9,750? That is 2925. Right. Then our total units will now be right. So it will change the total units. And this effect will ensure that already the normal loss is adjusted through the units that you are going to get. So there will no longer be any need of calculating normal loss. There will no longer be any need of allocating the normal loss, because the normal loss will not be included here when we find the cost per unit. So the production cost statement, you do it in exactly the same way, the allocation exactly the same way. The only difference is because of these units, the normal loss will auto allocate itself. So that's why it's called the shortcut method. It will not include this normal loss here. And because of that, we're not going to do the calculation of normal loss, and we are not going to do the allocation of the normal loss. So you go straight to the production cost statement. After the production cost statement, straight to the allocation statement. No calculation of normal loss, no allocation of normal loss. That's why it's called the shortcut. But it can only be possible if the opening WIP is below the wastage point and the closing WIP is above the wastage point. If those two conditions are not met, you can't use the shortcut method. So you'd find that in the question that I did last week, you can use the shortcut method. At your own time, you can try to use the shortcut method and see if you get the same answer. The answer that you get is the same at the end of the day in your cost allocation statement. What will change is the production cost per unit, but your cost allocation statement will allocate exactly in the same way your cost. So you can go and try it, but at that stage, I had not taught you the shortcut method. Any questions? Right. If we don't have any questions, then we'll continue during the weekend. As I told you that we are going to have another class on Sunday. Right. I will inform you the exact time. And also note that I'm not going to do the joint and product. I think we did it sometime when I was trying to prepare you for the first test. So please, the joint and byproduct costing, you can just refer to what we did. Thank you so much. Have a blessed evening, and God bless you richly.